Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Rev Left Radio. On today's episode, I have my good friend and comrade Esperanza Fonseca on the show to talk about health and fitness from a radical left-wing perspective. We talk about advice for people who want to get into fitness. We talk about the pitfalls of lots of health and fitness subcultures online, the ableism, the machismo, the supplement salesman, all the negatives that can come with it, and we try to offer a non-toxic left-wing perspective on health and fitness, trying to act as an educational and hopefully inspirational resource for people who want to better themselves in this way, in the realm of health and of fitness. We also, discuss some caveats, a few questions in. The last thing that we would ever want to do is present this stuff in a way that makes anybody feel bad about themselves, that makes anybody who is not able-bodied feel less than, and we go to great lengths throughout this episode to address those caveats and address those people who struggle with certain things and try to purge those toxic elements that you often find in health and fitness circles from the discussion and focus on ways that are inclusive and open to everybody, which I think is really incredibly important. And I couldn't have asked for a better guest to come on and have this conversation with. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Esperanza on health and fitness from a left-wing perspective. Enjoy.
Hey, Breht. My name is Esperanza Fonseca. I'm a labor organizer, currently actually in a personal training certification program, and also come from, the women's and proletarian feminist movement.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's an honor and a pleasure to have you back on. I know you and I are friends on Instagram, and I keep my Instagram very small and private. So I really enjoy following your content in general, and some of that content is your, working out and exercising, which is inspirational and sort of helped add a layer of inspiration to my, getting back into it full steam. And you've also, as I said before we started recording, have helped me with some form issues I had with my squat. So I was having some knee pains with my squatting and doing goblet squats because I work out by myself in a basement. I don't have a squat rack. So I was trying to do other forms of the squat, but it was really putting a lot of pressure on my knees, and you gave me great advice about the back squat that has completely eliminated my knee pain. And just in general, I've wanted to do an episode kind of tackling these basic issues of exercise and fitness for the left, talking about some of the ways in which this culture, these subcultures of fitness and health can be very toxic, and trying to fight against that while also promoting health and fitness on the left. And I thought you'd be a great guest to come on and talk with me and my audience about precisely that. And so I think we're going to have an interesting conversation. And I would also say, if you are already deeply established in the world of health and fitness, you have your own exercise routine, you already, do all this high level stuff, maybe this is too introductory for you. I really want to aim this conversation at people on the fence or who need a little extra push or motivation, or maybe want to get into getting more fit and healthy, but don't know where to start and really find conflicting stuff online. And so I was hoping to really kind of target this conversation at those sorts of people in hopes that maybe a few will find this episode useful. So perhaps the best way to start, Esperanza, is to just ask, how and why did you personally get into fitness?
Yeah, so for me, I have always had some sort of interest in fitness, but it really started to appear more in my teen years. And the reason why was because, my life around that time was so unstable that fitness really gave me an outlet to feel good. I remember just the feeling, for example, I used to run, and just all of those endorphins and those good feelings really helped counteract some of the stuff that I was going through. But it wasn't until recent years that I really began to get serious about fitness, and specifically, around strength training. I think more recently, as people know, coming from the women's movement, from the feminist movement, I myself am a survivor and I work with many survivors of, sexual and patriarchal violence. And in a world where, we're used to being objectified, where we're made to feel weak and powerless, fitness and strength training in particular can be a really strong antidote to that and a way for us to find healing, to reconnect with our bodies, to feel strong, and to reject that idea that, we have to look a certain way to be, an object for male consumption and instead, be able to build our bodies in a way that makes us feel good and feel strong. And so that led me to training in the past few years and now currently pursuing a master trainer certification with the ISFA.
Wow, yeah, that's awesome, and I think that resonates with a lot of people. I have similar, sort of reasons of getting into fitness. I think we'll talk about that actually in this next question. So let's just go ahead and move into that because the benefits are often the reason why people start doing it and keep doing it. For a very long time, I grew up playing sports and everything, but then I kind of gave up on it in late high school and through my 20s. I was focused on other things. And then as I got into my 30s, I started realizing that there's this process of aging and deterioration that happens. And I wanted to kind of fight against it. I wanted to not be tired all the time. But mostly it was out of this leads well into this next question, but out of certain forms of mental health collapses, if you will, time and time again, that taught me that physical exercise is one of the best sort of preventatives and ways to deal with really tough mental and emotional sort of issues that were going on. And so I think we can use that as the jumping off point to this next question, which is the benefits. So what benefits, mental, emotional, and physical, does consistent exercise offer?
Yeah, so I know that you've spoken about this quite a bit, right? But in terms of mental health, there is a lot of evidence that shows that, regular training, regular, physical fitness programs can, reduce stress, provide you with more, mental clarity, mental energy, can improve, several different mental health factors, reduce depression, improve focus in terms of, physical benefits, right? We know that regular exercise prolongs life, improves self-confidence. And there's also evidence that it boosts the brain's dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin, which, as I mentioned earlier, really helps with focus and attention and concentration and motivation and all of those things that we need just to function well in society, but also to do the very demanding and hard work that we do as organizers and as activists. Um, and then also, as you mentioned as well, all of us are aging, and there is this trend that as we age, we lose muscle mass, and that makes us far more susceptible to injuries, to falls. And when we work out, when we make sure that we are not losing muscle mass, but actually building it, we're also ensuring that later in life, we are going to have a higher quality of life. And so it's not just about the benefits we get right now, but also thinking, 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. That's huge for me as well. Wanting to stay physically active, physically engaged. The mental benefits are huge. In fact, I would say for me personally, they were primary. The physical benefits are wonderful. Being able to, not be tired, to be able to move your body around in space with much more ease. The mental, like, yeah, endorphin rush that you get post workout, where your mood is boosted. You feel if you're doing exercise right often, instead of making you feel utterly exhausted, it can make you feel reinvigorated to tackle the rest of the day. I work out in the mornings and I feel that it sets a certain standard for the rest of my day. I also think there's some intangibles as far as especially with strength training, but also with like long distance running or various forms of cardio. It can really build the capacity to increase your perseverance, your discipline, right? One of the things that I learned as I got into working out was that it wasn't about motivation, it was about discipline, right? I didn't have to wake up every day and recommit to working out. I would just set time aside every week, 3 days a week, to do this program. And no matter how I felt, whether I was motivated or not, I had committed myself to doing the thing regardless. And of course, every time I do it, even if I don't feel like doing it, by the time I'm finished, I'm happy I did it. I feel way better than I did before. And it kind of builds a positive momentum. And then there's the emotional sort of calmness and level-headedness that I can often feel in the wake of working out. And as somebody who's struggled with anxiety for huge chunks of my adult life, the physical exertion that comes with exercise has all but eradicated anxiety from my life. And that to me was one of the most startling and convincing sort of benefits that I got out of it to keep me going. And then it stops feeling like it's a chore or something I have to force myself to do. And I started feeling the shift within me where it became something I genuinely wanted to do and looked forward to doing. And that was a huge positive shift for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, although training has not sort of resolved all issues for me, it has really made a huge improvement. And that's something that I've noticed with myself and also, others that I train with.
Definitely. Why is it important for those of us on the political left to take health and fitness seriously? And how can it benefit us not only as individuals, but as members of collective organization and struggle?
Yeah, so I'm also really curious about hearing what your thoughts are on this. But for me, three main things come to mind. The first is building discipline and building the ability to push through hardship and struggle. When you are training, me, for example, in strength training, when you're at the bottom of a squat or a bench press or trying to get in those last few reps, and your mind constructs all of these premature barriers, and you really have to push yourself through. And I think that that sort of training builds discipline and builds perseverance that can be applied to other areas of our life in a similar way that if you practice meditation every day, you will be able to take that peace that you have cultivated and take that mental discipline and clarity and apply it to other areas of your life outside of meditation as well. I also think consistency and learning how to build habits, that's something that I know I struggle with. I know many of us do. It's just the way that our society is structured. But physical fitness and training requires us to fight through that and learn how to build a habit and how to be consistent with the things that we want to do, even though it's very difficult to do so. Um, and I'm also reminded of what Mao said on this, which is that, physical education not only harmonizes the emotions, but also strengthens the will. And he also connects it to the idea of military heroism, right? And he says that such objects of military heroism as courage, dauntlessness, audacity, and perseverance are all matters of will. And, on the left, we are building a militant movement to overthrow capitalism and transition to socialism, right? Overthrow the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie and implement a dictatorship of the people, of the proletariat. And so, therefore, right, building our will, strengthening our will is extremely important. And I also think that training as a cadre, training as an organization also really strengthens the bonds between people. And this is something that I actually experienced a few years ago where, we would study together, we would organize together, we would, do things together, but we would also train together. And that training really helped us coalesce into a strong unit. The second thing is that I think that movement and fitness is a right that belongs to people, but is often taken from us. The way that public space has been destroyed, the way that our work hours and our work days have increased. We, under wage slavery, it's very difficult to be able to experience the joys of movement and the joys of fitness. And I personally do not want to let this, hellish capitalist system take that from me. And so I'm going to fight to maintain that. And then the third thing is just the issue of self-defense, right? We know that, you know, fascism is on the rise right now, that right-wing extremist people are getting increasingly violent against us. And especially coming from a women's organization, self-defense is important. And I think that getting strong and getting fit so that we could defend ourselves and our comrades is something that we should not discount.
Mm. Yeah, amen. And in fact, you literally touched on everything that I had um, lined out for my responses to this question. So I couldn't agree more. And I actually did read the Mao's writing on physical education last night in preparation for this episode, and found a lot of that to be incredibly interesting and dovetail with a lot of the stuff that you and I want to say in this episode. So if anybody out there is interested, you can definitely go check that out for free online. But yeah, there's also the fascist right, especially in Europe, but more and more in the U.S., where they're organizing some version of them, at least some formations on the fascist right, organizing in and around sporting events, MMA gyms, boxing gyms, weightlifting, working out, etc. And these people are obviously preparing themselves for various forms of struggle that could arise in the coming future. And I think when we see that, we have to take that seriously on our side as well. And I do think that one of the ways we can promote left-wing proletarian culture, our own culture, against the dominant culture, is to have areas of unity and working together that aren't always and first and foremost ostensibly political, right? Like, I mean, not acutely political. They can be things like sports clubs, like gyms, like working out together. And these are things that we've also implemented in our local organizing at various times in the last several years as well, where we all go out and we go on a long hike, for example, with backpacks together. And there's different levels of fitness, and we're all only as good as the slowest person in our team. And we're always there to stay together. Nobody gets ahead. No individual shines. We're all there to encourage each other. And that can be a deeply connecting process that helps any actual organization function even more smoothly and more as a unified whole. But I think the answers you gave were spot on. And insofar as I would add one more on top of that pile that you set out for us, is it's a hedge against burnout. I think a lot of times organizing can be brutal. It can really burn people out. It can become exhausting. And I think to become more physically and mentally and emotionally robust through fitness can help us deal with, as you were saying, the struggles that are implicit in organizing at any level at all, and can actually hedge against the worst forms, at least, of burnout, which are often a mix of mental, emotional, and physical exhaustion. So for all those reasons and more, I think it's important for us to take it seriously. Now, I do want to move forward, and this is, I think, a really important question and a really important issue, and I want to set some time aside to really go deep into it, because we were thinking of even doing a caveat up front about this stuff, but felt it folded well into this next question. So I'll ask you this question, and then we can go back and forth a little bit on it. What elements of fitness culture and gym culture do you think are negative, reactionary, or unwelcoming to new people, and maybe how we can avoid those?
Yeah, so I guess there's sort of 4 points that I want to bring up. The first is that I'll just talk a little bit about ableism and sometimes the very ignorant mentality that the fitness industry and fitness influencers take towards people and reasons why they may or may not be able to work out or train or other things. So something that one of the people that I'm connected with on Instagram reminded me of is that, yes, physical fitness and training helps with all of these problems that we're experiencing. But at the same time, sometimes those problems become primary and maybe they need to be resolved first before somebody can start training. And so it's not always this sort of blanket solution of just, train and everything will get better. Sometimes you need to make an honest assessment and understand, where to start. And an example of that is, a few years ago when we were really in the start of the pandemic, my anxiety was so bad that I was not even able to leave my home. And so just telling me, oh, start strength training, go running, like that wouldn't have worked for me at the moment. And I really had to start small and figure out how to resolve the most pressing issue, which was the debilitating social and general anxiety. And from there, be able to slowly introduce movement into my lifestyle, which, happened very slowly and incrementally. Um, and so I think that's one of the things that I wanted to touch on with that, right? And then I also think the fact that so much of the fitness industry only looks at sort of normative bodies and how those bodies can move and can work out and train. And I think we really need to broaden our view and bring in different kinds of people and look at what movement and training can look like for them. Because I do believe that most everybody can find some form of movement, whether it's vigorous or not, that they enjoy and that benefits their health. Now, another thing I wanted to bring up is the right-wing libertarianism that is so present in gym culture and fitness culture. You go to gyms and so many of them have the, don't tread on me flag. And I think that this is just how fitness culture is used as an indoctrination tool to right wing ideology. If you start looking at gym videos on Instagram, it won't be long before you find it connected to right wing ideology, to Trump, to, misogyny, etc. And you don't see that with left wing ideas. You see that with right wing ideas. That's, you know, in my opinion, one of the reasons why it's so important for us as well to take back this space because there's so many young people that are looking to improve themselves through fitness and they start looking for fitness and they end up indoctrinated into right-wing ideology and fascistic ideology. Then there's the issue of hyper-individualism, right? Fitness culture is promoted as this, individual ascension to success, right? And especially this idea of like isolation, I think of, these gym influencer videos where, the men just sort of put on their hoodies and go to the gym and it like romanticizes this isolated life, and almost like justifies the isolation we experience under capitalism. Um, and I think that's a problem, right? We should be promoting community, strong bonds between community, and not just this idea of like the rogue lone wolf, isolated individual, especially not romanticizing it. And then fitness is also promoted as a cure to the problems of capitalism and often promoted as a way to further numb us and disconnect us from political struggle. And I think that, it's our job to sort of fight against that and connect fitness to political struggle. And then the last thing is just the issue of patriarchy and misogyny. So the first is that, especially for women, right, there's this extreme focus on aesthetics, and it's for men too. And this isn't always a bad thing. It's okay to care about how you look, right? You shouldn't feel guilty about that. It's not anti-feminist or anti-Marxist or whatever for you to want to feel good about how you look. That's okay. But I think that, when it becomes obsessive or when it, becomes you trying to reach this patriarchal standard of beauty, whether, how a man should look or how a woman should look, and you're always chasing after that, that's where it becomes really unhealthy,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Um, and also in terms of the focus on aesthetics, the body image promoted by so many of these fitness influencers and, in the fitness industry is not realistic and it's actually unhealthy. So, a lot of people post these photos where it's either during their competition or, during photo shoots where they spend months getting to a certain level of leanness that just is not maintainable throughout the entire year. And that's a false image in the same way that somebody editing their photos is a false image. And then lastly, just this whole idea of like the villain arc. Like if you watch gym videos, you see that, a lot of these men promote this idea of like some woman harmed them and now they're going to the gym as the start of their villain arc. And it's often connected to Andrew Tate fans, to this like misogynistic culture that, advocates to just use women to treat them poorly. Um, and that's something I've noticed that I think really needs to be combated.
Mm. Yeah, I love those answers. Absolutely spot on. The ableism stuff is core. There's so much stuff in the fitness health culture that just either completely ignores them or makes them feel as if, whatever situation you're dealing with, that, it's like it's just promoted to able-bodied people intrinsically, and then the people with disabilities of various sorts are completely just wiped out or made to feel like this is not a place for them. That's a problem. The machismo and the manosphere, like you were talking about, deeply connected to this stuff. We have to reject that, and we have to put forward left-wing alternatives to precisely that in the realm of health and fitness, as you were saying. And then, yes, the unhealthy body image issues, or the obsessing over pure aesthetics, when, I think first and foremost, it should be about being a healthier person, or all over, all around, a mentally, emotionally, and physically healthier person. That should be the primary focus. And then any aesthetic gains that you get are, like you said, laudable, beautiful. You can be happy about them, but they don't need to be the main focal point of why you're doing this stuff, because I think that can create many other issues down the line. But one more thing I would like to add on top of everything you said is, because we live in capitalism, so many of these health and fitness subcultures are dominated by the idea that you have to buy stuff to start working out. You have to buy all the supplements, you have to buy all the equipment. Everybody's trying to sell you something. You need pre-workout, you need post-workout, you need to do this and that, you need to buy this, you need to get this gym membership. And I really want to stress the point that you can engage in really effective exercise and not spend a dime. Some people, because of the sort of exercise they want to engage with, might have to, right? You might want to weight train, so therefore you have to buy a gym membership or buy a bench or something like that. But for the most part, especially when people are getting started off, you can really just completely ignore the idea that you need to put down money to start your exercise journey, and find various ways of engaging in exercise that don't cost you anything at all. But again, once you start going onto Instagram or getting into these forums, the amount of commodities that are shoved in your face, and you are made to feel as if you have to buy this stuff or else your exercise is for nothing. I think you should be absolutely suspicious of that, and reject that straight up. Do you agree with that?
Oh, I agree 100%. I mean, the supplement industry is just so full of BS. I mean, first of all, most of these supplements, there is no real evidence behind them, and supplement companies will take unrelated studies or studies that just are not conclusive and, slap them on their marketing campaigns, right? And use them to sell it to people. Most supplements are just completely unnecessary, unneeded, just a waste of your money. And, like Brett said, the fitness industry is, well, it's an industry, right? They're trying to sell you something. And so oftentimes you'll hear people saying, don't do this, don't eat that. And it's usually always a way to sell you what they want you to telling you to do. So please definitely be careful of me on things that you just really don't need.
Yeah. And I've personally fallen prey to that as well. A few years ago, I wanted to get into running. And then I don't know why, but I had convinced myself that in order to do this, I need to go out and I need to buy new shoes and I need to buy a specific outfit for running that I never used. And I immediately gave up on the entire endeavor, but I spent a couple $100 buying things that I absolutely did not need. And when I recommitted to exercise and getting fit, I told myself straight up, you don't have to buy anything. Just get out there, move your body, and see where it takes you. But yes, I think that's a huge thing, and it's always going to be promoted, always going to be shoved in your face, and so you should be aware of that, I think, as well. The next question I have for you, and maybe we've already touched on this, so you can be brief with this if you want to, but what are healthy reasons to get into working out, and what are some less than healthy reasons that people use to get into it?
Yeah, so I think we touched on this a little bit in the prior questions, but I first want to point out that sometimes unhealthy reasons can become healthy reasons. So, at first I started lifting weights because I was really unhappy with my body. I felt that I didn't look the way I should look. Especially being trans, I just felt a lot of pressure to look a certain way. And slowly over time, how I looked, and particularly how well I blended into the idea of what a woman should look like, became less and less important until, to be honest, I really don't care much about it.
Mm.
And what became more important was this endeavor to build strength, to push myself past my limits, and to see what I could really achieve through this. And that's what became exciting. And that's when I really became, open to this world of fitness and what it could really offer beyond reasons that are imbued with self-hatred and insecurity that the fitness industry and the beauty industry and the cosmetic surgery industry love to profit off of. I think that, as you mentioned, right, too much focus on aesthetics, or starting out because of reasons of self-hatred are often pretty unhealthy. But I think that regardless of what reason you want to start moving or you want to, begin your fitness journey, figure out where you're at and take an honest assessment of that and see how you can move from perhaps more unhealthy reasons to more healthy reasons. Wanting to improve yourself, wanting to see, how far you could really go, wanting to get strong and healthy so that you can be in this struggle, be in this movement, for as long as you can. I think those are all great reasons. And oh, one other thing too is, the older I get, the more I think about our youth. And I also want to encourage and promote healthy behaviors among them because they're going to inherit a world that is going to be much more hostile than our world because of climate change, among other things. And I just want to make sure that, they have us as healthy role models that help promote healthy habits among them so that they're equipped with everything they can to both continue the struggle and live the most fulfilling lives that they can.
Yeah, really well said, and I love that last point as well. And I start to feel that as well as I get older, starting to understand myself as filling a sort of a role modelish role for young comrades coming up. And I recently got invited to Arizona State University to give a speech, and it was sort of the moment where I really realized like I'm talking to like 19, 20-year old, students who started listening to Rev Left when they were like 14, 15. And that's an incredible responsibility because you're no longer as I when I started, I had this felt sense I'm talking to my peers. And then as I age, I start to realize I'm in my mid 30s now. I'm talking to the next generation coming up in a lot of these instances, and that imbues in me a real sense of responsibility, and I think highlights exactly what you're saying, that older comrades have to take the stuff that we've learned the hard way and try to, pass down that wisdom and that lived experience and the knowledge that we get from that to the younger comrades coming up to try to put them in a better position to succeed and to carry on the fight. And I think that's incredibly important. So now that we have a basic, overview of why we get into it, what the benefits are, what we should reject in the fitness and health subcultures and the whole world surrounding that stuff, why it's important for the left to take this stuff seriously, let's get into some practical advice. So for the person that is sitting on the fence, that wants to maybe start but doesn't know where, or maybe it has a lot of conflicting information they're finding online, what advice would you give to people who may just be trying to get more fit and aren't sure where to start?
Yeah, so for me, I always think that it's important to start with an assessment of your current level of activity. How sedentary are you or how much do you move? For some people, maybe the place to start is just trying to walk more. Walking is something that a lot of people don't realize is, can be such a healthy and life-changing behavior once you start to do it more. If you are someone who perhaps lives a very sedentary lifestyle, maybe one of the immediate things you can start doing is, taking time every day to walk more, whether it's, 30 minutes or an hour every day, or just trying to implement more walking and more movement throughout your day whenever you're able to. Now, if you maybe have been moving a little bit, you're not too sedentary and you really want to start an actual, training program, I always recommend just starting small and starting simple. You don't need to stress over finding the perfect program, or finding, the exact number of sets or reps or this or that you need to do. For me, coming from, a background in strength training and bodybuilding, not necessarily running, I can speak to that and say that, in general, right, you want to focus on what are called compound movements. And those are things that move multiple joints. So, for example, a squat, a bench press, a military press, a deadlift, a hip thrust, a chin up, those kinds of things that work multiple muscle groups at the same time. Um, and sort of isolation movements such as, a bicep curl or a leg extension, those can come later once you've built, a stronger foundation. I think that in general, you really should try to listen to your body. Your body will tell you when you're overtraining. There is a bad pain, such as, let's say you're doing squats and you feel a sharp pain in your knee. That's a sign that, okay, let's take a step back and reassess and see how we could do that again without pain. Or if you're deadlifting and you feel pain in your back, that is a sign, to step back and reassess. Whereas there is a sort of good sort of pain, a healthy level of soreness is okay. That's not necessarily something bad. Um, and I think, yeah, as time you start slow and simple and you can build up from there. And there's also some resources maybe we could share that I think help people looking to construct a program.
Yeah, and we'll get to resources in a little bit, a few more questions here, and then we'll lay out some resources. But I loved what you said. I love listening to your body, not overdoing it, getting into exercise based on where you are starting from and doing it in a reasonable way, not trying to jump in full steam ahead right away. Sometimes, if you're deconditioned, you need to sort of get back up to a basic level of conditioning, and then you can move into more rigorous forms of exercise. Getting outside and just walking is really a great start. In fact, that's how I started during COVID, just the restlessness of the isolation. I had no exercise program at that point. But I just said, like, for 30 minutes a day, I'm just going to go outside and walk. And that started a positive cycle where then I started getting into running. I played basketball. Then I started liking exercise. And that's what I got into weight training after a few months of this more basic stuff of cardio and basketball and all of that. So that's important. The other thing I would say is find something you actually enjoy, because I think the worst thing we can do, whether it's meditation, exercise, or trying to build other healthy habits, is to create it as a chore for ourselves, something that we dread, that we don't actually like doing, but we feel we have to force ourselves to do in order to get some results down the line, right? And there may be some truth in that. You are trying to build towards a certain, accomplishment or whatever. But finding something you enjoy is, I think, more important than any specific program. Because if you enjoy doing something, you're much more likely to stick to it. And that can be, honestly, as simple as hiking, as kayaking, as swimming. There are an almost infinite amount of ways you can get outside and move your body that will be beneficial, that will bring in many of the benefits we talked about earlier. And if you can do it while you're having fun, it's the best way to do it. Getting into organized sports, for example, is something that I'm actually looking into, starting a little pickup basketball league locally this summer with a few friends of mine. And when I'm playing sports, I'm not thinking, oh, I'm doing this chore, I'm doing this exercise. I'm just having fun with my friends, and I'm working my entire body, and I'm getting my heart rate up, and I'm out in the sun, and that's what is important. And treating your working out as an end in and of itself, I think, is part of that. Treating it as not a chore, but a practice that you're cultivating, and that's where it comes into, like, focusing, if you choose weight training, focusing on your form and trying to get better every time you go into the gym at the technique itself, and kind of think of it as something you're cultivating, not something you're forcing yourself to do. And then the last thing I would say is, I think if somebody wants to get into exercise in order to lose weight, I think that's a valid reason to get into exercise. But I really think it can become a problem if that becomes your main point of focus and you obsess over the scale, because body weight fluctuates wildly. Getting into working out, it's not a linear downward, smooth decline into losing weight. It's often very jagged with ups and downs and everything in between. And if you hitch your wagon completely to that number that appears on the scale, I think it can really be discouraging and throw you off. And also, if you're doing strength training, muscle, it's weight, right? Like if you're building muscle, you might not be losing weight, but you're building muscle and displacing fat, and so you're actually getting healthier, even though when you step on the scale, it might more or less look the same. And I think that's very helpful when people are getting into it, not to obsess over that, to find something they enjoy, and to treat it as a practice that you're cultivating and an end in and of itself, not merely a means to something else. And I think that could actually create a habit that's healthy and that you look forward to, and not a drudgery or a chore that you force yourself to do, which makes life, the quality of life, go down if you're forcing yourself to do something you hate all the time. Do you think those are reasonable points, Esperanza?
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that.
Cool. All right, so let's get to the next little piece of advice, which is, how much on average, and this is an average, everybody is different, so keep that in mind, but how much on average should someone work out so as not to fall into the error of overtraining, which is a real problem that people find themselves in, nor the error of undertraining and just, not getting any results at all? What would you say to that?
Yeah, so again, I think it really does depend on the individual. For me, I train 6 days a week, but I have to be very careful of how much volume I'm doing each day. Otherwise, I could very easily begin overtraining and exposing myself both to injuries, but also to not making progress, right? Because, recovery is when your muscle is built. Your muscle is not built in the gym or during training, it's built during recovery. And so, with that said, I think that, if you start off small and you slowly build up from there, you will realize how much, volume your body could handle. I think this is called MRV, maximum recoverable volume, and finding out what that limit is for you. And then, designing your program or your regimen around that. I think in general, at least one rest day is necessary for everyone. But two, three rest days, four, like those are all fine, right? I think also really focusing on sleep and nutrition is also important because when you're training, you really need to be able to get good, nourishing sleep in order to recover from your training. And also nutrition, although I would say to be very careful because nutrition is one of those areas where there is just so much misinformation online. You have people promoting all of these fad diets. You have people, saying that there's chemicals in food as if all food isn't, made of chemicals. And I think that people really need to do their research and be really careful about falling into misinformation that surrounds nutrition. But in general, right, we're just talking about, eating more protein, enough protein for you to recover, as well as eating like good, healthy, whole foods like fruits and vegetables, getting your antioxidants. They say eat the rainbow because antioxidants are in the pigments of fruits and vegetables. And so eating a diversity of colors ensures you're getting, a diversity of antioxidants, et cetera. And also water and hydration and all of that.
Yeah, hydration is absolutely essential, and I totally agree. The nutritional science world is a fraught world. There is lots of different interpretations of different data. There is no one single diet that is the correct diet, and I would be very skeptical of any extreme diets at all, like obviously we have the Peterson diet of just meat, but anybody that's, trying to do an extreme diet, I would be skeptical of, and just kind of fall back on, as Esperanza was saying, nutritious, varied, whole foods based diet. And that should be the bulk of what you eat. Stuff that nature naturally produces that does not need tons of processing, is not full of tons of sugar. And then if that's your basis, you can also enjoy yourself as well. We don't want to turn any of this into self-flagellation, and we don't want it to decrease our quality of life. We want it to increase our quality of life. And if that means being able to have beers with your friends on the weekend, or if that means eating cake at the wedding, playing or whatever, having a full Thanksgiving dinner and not worrying about it. You have to make room for those things. You can't be overly rigid, overly dogmatic when it comes to exercise or nutrition. You have to be able to implement these things into your life in a way that boosts the quality of your life, not decreases it. That's essential. As far as how much somebody should work out, I've heard the 3x5 rule. This is for like an intermediate, I think, person, or maybe somebody starting off, depending on what exercises you're actually doing. This is more in the realm of weight training. But the 3x5 rule is something like 3 to 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps for 3 to 5 exercises done 3 to 5 times a week. At least for me, that's been kind of helpful. I'm not exactly subscribed to 3 to 5 and everything, but it's a nice little template that I've used to not overdo it, and to have an exercise routine that invigorates me and gives me energy as opposed to utterly exhausts me. And, Esperanza working out 6 days a week is awesome, but that is definitely something that I don't think I'm speaking out of turn that you've worked up to. It's not something you jump into right away, and I think that's important to note.
Yeah, absolutely. That protocol sounds pretty solid. And I will say that, for me, training 6 days a week, I'm not going as hard every day as I was when I was training 3 to 4 days a week. So, again, it's all about that maximum recoverable volume. And whether you train 1, 2, 3, or 6 days a week, figuring out, how to spread that volume over the week to not overtrain. And I did want to say about, figuring out training protocols. It really also depends on what kind of strength training you want to do. So, in general, you have bodybuilding, powerlifting, and, what we would call weightlifting or Olympic weightlifting. And I actually would love to share resources towards the end for people who could help you, and who are actually on the left in each of those three areas in terms of building a program. Um, you know, uh, and then just one other thing I wanted to say about nutrition earlier is that something that's been really helpful for me is the idea of starting with addition and not subtraction. So when people, try to start living a healthier lifestyle and training and thinking about their nutrition, a lot of times we start out trying to subtract things. Oh, don't eat this food, don't eat that food, eat less of this. But I think that a really great way to start is thinking about addition. Is there a way to add more fiber? Is there a way to add more fresh fruits and vegetables, more whole foods? And thinking about adding them into your diet at first instead of what can you cut or subtract.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's each give a summary of our training program, just so people can get an idea of how we put these ideas into practice and what works for us. And I would say, I've been doing this consistently for about 6, 7, maybe 8 months, if you count the basketball I was doing before I started weight training. And this is the point that I've gotten to. Esperanza is more advanced, more knowledgeable, and so our programs are going to be different. But I think kind of giving a little inside look into what we do might be helpful in some way to some people. And both of us are engaged primarily in weight training. So if your exercise of choice is going to be something that's very different, like, I just like hiking or I like swimming, that's fine too. But hopefully this can still be useful. So Esperanza, you just want to give a basic summary of what you do exercise wise throughout the week?
Yeah, so first I'll say that the best split that I've ever done is called a push pull, and then I had 2 leg days. So I was training 4 days a week. Push day, literally think of taking your arms and pushing things away from you. So that included bench press. It included, military press, where you basically take the barbell or the dumbbells and push it above your head, right? Using primarily your shoulders. And then, some accessory work around, building your shoulders and your triceps. And then pull day is thinking, literally pulling things towards you. So that would involve chin ups. It would involve, bent over rows or dumbbell rows. It would involve, cable rows and cable pull downs, things like that. Um, Mostly, focusing on the back. And then I would have 2 leg days. One is just focused on, legs, generally. So, you focus on, your quads, your hamstrings, and that can involve, squats, deadlifts, and then isolation work like leg extensions, leg curls. And then the second leg day would be focused on the glutes, and that is sometimes an underdeveloped or undertrained muscle, especially among men, but they're actually really important to your overall health and strength. And they're also, the largest muscle group in the body. And so that day would really focus on hip thrusts, and then, some isolation work from there. More recently, I've begun experimenting with a 6 day training split where I take each of those six main lifts, which are bench press, military press, chin up, deadlift, hip thrust, and squat, and basically assign one day to each of those lifts and then have, maybe two accessory works, lifts after that. And so I'm experimenting with that. I've seen it recommended by some trainers, and the verdict is still out on that one.
Yeah, very interesting. So mine's a little different and probably a little less advanced. And it's a Monday, Wednesday, Friday weight training routine that I work out for about, I would say, an hour and a half on those 3 days, and then I allow myself Tuesdays and Thursdays maybe do some light cardio, go for a walk, go for a hike when it warms up, swim, play basketball, and then I give my weekends the time to really rest. Warm ups are also really important when you're weight training, and one of the things that I've actually been able to do is my in-laws actually live nearby, about a 10 to 15 minute walk from my house, and they have over their lives accrued like a bench press and some weights and a punching bag and some basic stuff in their basement after their youngest daughter moved out, that they turned their basement into like a little impromptu workout room. So I don't have to go to the gym. I don't have to pay anything. And walking that 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes I'll throw on a 25-pound backpack. Sometimes I'll just walk normally. But that walking is actually, I view that as part of my warm-up activity, and I do it regardless of the weather. So if it's snowing out, if it's raining out, there's a little bit of the perseverance that comes with just walking for 10 minutes in a shitty, sort of weather situation. And then I do some more warm ups when I get there. But the basis of my training program is centered around the core movements, kind of what like Esperanza was saying: push, pull, hinge, squat, and carry. Five basic core movements that you're definitely going to want to be able to perform, and are going to be able, and you're going to want to be able to perform deep into your age, right? Like being able to go into a deep squat as you get older is really important. Being able to hinge, to push weight away from you, to pull weight towards you. These are all basic functional strength things that can be applied day to day, whether it's picking up kids or carrying in the groceries or, manual labor, whatever else you have to do. So quickly, my exercises are kettlebell swings, bench press, barbell deadlift, barbell back squat, thanks to Esperanza helping me out with that, a kettlebell overhead press, and then I end up my routine with a kettlebell suitcase carry, and I have a 55-pound kettlebell that I do most of those things with. And so I think in more or less all that creates all the core movements, the pushing. The deadlift is a hinge and a pull. I mean, I could throw in some pull-ups, some chin-ups to really get that pull movement, figured out. But the hinge is going to be at play in the kettlebell swing as well as the deadlift, the squat, obviously the back squat, and then ending up every single workout with the loaded suitcase carry. So just taking a 55-pound kettlebell in one hand, keeping your back straight, walking slowly, for about 30 feet and back. It helps with the traps. It helps with the core. The other side of your core that you're holding the weight on has to compensate for the weight pulling your body that way, and that strengthens the side muscles in your abs and whatnot. And so I feel like I get a full body workout. I practice the core movements, and I walk away feeling very good. And this has worked for me, and it's continuing to work for me. Do you find anything in there, Esperanza, that is wrong, or does that more or less sound like a fairly good training program?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that sounds like a great training program. And again, I think it, all depends on what your goals are. And so, if you're maybe overwhelmed or like confused on what to do at home, I think, just really starting with what your goals are, and then going from there can be a great place to start. But I think there's no perfect program, there's no right or wrong program, and it really depends on one, what your goals are, and two, what makes you feel good.
Yes, definitely. All right. We're kind of coming towards the end of here, but I have a couple more questions for you. What activities in our lives can support our fitness training or complement our fitness training?
Yeah, so I think as we talked about a little bit, right, recovery is so important. So, things like really ensuring that you can get, good quality sleep every night, nutrition, which again, be very careful of all the misinformation, but focusing on good nutrition, and hydration, right? Getting enough water. I think those three things are really important. And then also, I know you meditate, Brett, but I think meditation is also a very underappreciated tool that we could be using. I don't uh, believe meditation is sort of this cure to all the ills that we experience in capitalism. And I really hate the commodification of meditation by, corporate bosses who push it as this sort of way to, basically be a better worker. But I do think it could be extremely helpful both to our fitness journey, but also just to our daily lives, right? And I would really encourage everyone to pick up that practice as well.
Hmm. Yeah, just like exercise, meditation can be co-opted and reduced and turned into salves, right, for shitty conditions. Putting the onus back on the individual. It's not the society's deteriorating conditions that is making you sad. It's really you need to take the responsibility of meditating and exercising to adjust yourself to fundamentally unjust conditions. And of course, Esperanza and I utterly reject that. And we think exercise and meditation can offer something much, much, much deeper and even confrontational to capital if done in certain ways and in certain contexts. And so you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater just because they can be co-opted. You want to find what's actually useful about them and use them in reasonable ways, but understand that ultimately, I exercise and I meditate so that I can ideally be better positioned to confront the injustices of the world and help, other people build a better one. And I think, everything I do is contextualized within that broader aim. And I think that can help prevent this hyper individualistic using these things as sort of opiates, if you will, to numb yourself or to take care of your own individual situation, even though a collective social struggle needs to be waged. So that's essential. But just generally, I would say I highly echo your point about rest. That is when muscles are built. It's in the rest periods between working out. So, if you're not allowing your body to rest, you're literally undermining what you're doing in the weight room or outside or whatever your exercise program is. But I would say that I often promote these 4 foundations of health, and this is not groundbreaking or unique to me or anything like that. These are very scientifically backed pillars of a healthy life. First one is a high quality, consistent sleep schedule. There are things you can do to make sleeping better. Have a cooler, darker room, wear eye shades, expose yourself to sunlight early in the morning so your circadian rhythm gets set in a healthier way. But getting good sleep is essential for good rest, which is essential for getting the benefits of exercise and just for having a balanced mind and approach to the world. So quality, consistent sleep is number one. And this is not in any order. These are just 4 pillars. The second one is, as we were discussing, nutritious, varied, whole foods-based diet. Nothing extreme. Be able to enjoy yourself, but the core of your diet should be natural foods from the actual earth, not hyper-processed stuff. Number 3, this entire episode is about it, near daily exercise of one form or another, getting outside, moving your body. And then number 4, which I think is sometimes overlooked, is meaningful social relationships. It's proven scientifically that to live a healthy life requires having not a fuck ton, but just even a few core, meaningful social relationships that orient you to other people, to your community, and are absolutely essential for basic levels of health and happiness for social animals like we are. So good sleep, good food, good exercise, good relationships. If you tend to all four of those things, you can create for yourself a really good foundation to do other meaningful things in your life. And so I would say those four things are really essential. And the three things that aren't exercise really help support and complement whatever fitness and exercise training that you're doing. Does that sound right to you, Esperanza?
Oh, yeah, that sounds completely on point. And I've heard you say that before, and I've definitely tried to incorporate more of those principles into my life as well.
Cool. All right. Well, the last question here is not really a question, it's just putting out some resources. So, what resources would you recommend to people who listen to this conversation, find it somewhat inspiring, and want to dive deeper into this world while avoiding all the pitfalls that we've outlined above? What would some resources you would offer be?
Yeah, so I have four resources that I would like to offer. The first is, if you are interested more in bodybuilding, right, which is sort of the sport of building muscle, I would definitely recommend that you check out Jeff Nippard. He's on YouTube, he's also on Instagram, literally Jeff Nippard, JEFFNIPPARD. He's one of the people that, well, one, he actually, really is able to read and interpret the science. And two, he's not a reactionary. I'm connected with him. We follow each other on Instagram, and he has pretty good politics. So I definitely recommend following him for any, bodybuilding information. Second is if you're interested in powerlifting, which is basically, the sport of building strength in three main lifts, which are squats, deadlifts, and bench press. I would recommend checking out Jim Eli of Zao Strength, ZAO Strength. And he's also on the left, right? He's also, a Marxist, a socialist, and he puts out some really good content on how to build strength, how to start a strength building program. And the third is if you're interested more in weightlifting, right, which are some of those Olympic weightlifting movements, I would recommend my friend David Bayer, who is a coach with Meta Weightlifting. They're on Instagram, and their handle is Enter the Meta, which is META. And they put out some really great educational content as well, even if you're not interested in becoming necessarily a competitive weightlifter, but you want to learn how to squat better or how to do certain movement patterns better. Their content is really great. And they also align politically with us generally. And then the fourth is in terms of nutrition, I just think that there's so much misinformation out there. And so one person I would really encourage people check out, his name is Dr. Ids. And, he's a physician, board certified in lifestyle medicine, master's in nutritional research. And he basically just debunks a lot of the misinformation that makes people feel bad and is used to sell them products that they don't need. And his account is dr_idz.
Perfect. And I will link to as much of that as I can in the show notes. All four of those recommendations for sure will be in the show notes so people can find them easier. And then I would just add one more resource that I've personally found helpful, especially for people who are interested in the science behind, exercise routines and working out. It's actually the Huberman Lab podcast. He has a 6-episode series with Dr. Andy Galpin on exercise science. And every episode is about 2+ hours long, and they really get down into the nitty gritty of the science behind cardio, strength training, nutrition and supplementation, what to do, what not to do, what does and doesn't work, and can get into the details of it in depth, all deeply rooted in the latest exercise science. So if you're scientifically inclined, I think that 6-episode series with Dr. Andy Galpin on the Huberman Lab podcast is a great place to start. I learned a lot from it, so I'm offering that as well. But I really love Esperanza's emphasis on people that more or less share our politics, because I do believe this is a terrain of political struggle, or can be. It's a terrain of ideology, and to have people with good politics talking about this stuff that's scientifically informed, that doesn't make people feel like shit, that doesn't replicate some of the harmful logics found in other subcultures, I think really is an important part. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you overall, Esperanza, for being an inspiration, for doing so much wonderful stuff in the world, and for helping me get inspired and get detailed on some of my issues with working out. And just seeing somebody go for it, it can be inspirational, and you've been that for me and for others. So I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you coming on. Before I let you go, though, is there anything else you want to plug, anything you want to recommend, or any way that listeners can find you and your work online?
Yeah, well, first of all, just want to thank you. You also are a huge inspiration to me, and I'm very blessed to be connected with you. In terms of, anything that I would like to plug before leaving, I guess I just want to say, as, many listeners might know, I was affiliated with a large, anti-imperialist feminist organization, and several of us have split and are in the process of building a new organization recentered around the principles of anti-imperialism, proletarian feminism, and anti-revisionism. And, I would just like to invite anyone who is interested in learning more about the organization we're building or joining or supporting our work to, come check us out. You can find information on how to contact us via email on my Medium blog, which is proletarianfeminist.medium.com. And I would love to get connected with you on Instagram if you're there, just at Proletarian Feminist. And I'm no longer on Twitter, which in terms of health, fitness, and well-being is probably one of the best decisions that I've ever made.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't recommend that enough. I stay off it. I check it once in a while, but that's a great point as well.